G'day, new starters. How you doing? When I was in the States just back in June, a friend of mine and I went to see the Superman movie, Man of Steel, the new one, and we enjoyed it a great deal, except that we had booked an appointment for immediately after the movie, and we didn't actually know how long the movie went. It turned out it went much later than our appointment. So right before the end, we had to get up and leave and miss the end of the movie. But we enjoyed what we saw immensely. And clearly, the idea of superheroes is something that is attractive to most people, or not, or at least many people, enough to make the movie very, very successful. And I wondered myself, why is it that we find the idea of superheroes attractive? I also wondered if that same drive was not the reason that primitive societies and people groups didn't begin to develop the idea of the gods and demigods. And for me, as I've considered this issue, I've wondered if the reason isn't because when we feel out of control, when we feel like circumstances are greater than us, we certainly want someone who is able to intervene on our behalf and to ensure that circumstances don't become too great for us to handle. And there's this idea of one that we can trust in and rely on. I'm also suspicious that it's true that when we're in circumstances that are out of control, or at least thinking about circumstances that are out of control, there's a fear within us that such situations have the opportunity to expose us and reveal our inadequacies and our weaknesses. In the second chapter of John, there are two stories that kind of speak to this idea. First story is the story of Jesus turning water into wine. It's said to be his first miracle by John. And they're at a wedding. They run out of wine. And Jesus' mother says to Jesus, "We're out of wine." And he seems hesitant, but his mother says, "Just do what he tells you to do." And Jesus says, "Take 6 pots, fill them with water, and take those pots to the supervisor for the wedding." And they do so. And the end result is this beautiful wine at the wedding. The second story is the story of Jesus driving out the sellers from the temple. It's not so much that there's trade going on in the temple, because in the outer court that was quite acceptable. It's the idea that people are being taken advantage of by people that should know better in the temple and reflecting poorly on who God is. In both of these stories, however, that seem to be about control, there are reflections of the fact that Jesus Christ will be crucified and that he will rise again. And so these stories become mirrors of what will come. And the idea that there will come a time when Jesus will be seen to be completely out of control. And yet even there, he will have the capacity to be sufficient. And there's echoes of that in the way the first story is written and the themes that are running through there. And then in the second story, the priests say, "Well, by what authority do you do these things?" And Jesus says, "If you were to tear this temple down, I would raise it up again in 3 days." And the Gospel of John says that when the disciples remembered him saying that after his resurrection, they believed. But of course, the theme for this journey through John is believing. What are we to believe in? And here's the issue, that Jesus' power, his competency, his capacity to be more than the circumstances is not so much reflected in his ability to overcome situations, but in truth, in his death and his resurrection, he provides the power for our lives to be able to live through whatever comes, knowing that nothing else has the final word upon our lives except for the reality of God's love at work in our lives. And that is the Jesus in whom we believe, the one who may or certainly have the capacity to do whatever needs to be done in the circumstances, but all of that is reflective of the fact that he has given his life for you and I in order to transform us